Paul McCoy with Pmac Precision Custom Rifles. We're here in my shop today. We're going to talk a little bit about the components or about the factors that go into ordering a custom rifle. During this video you may hear some wind outside. We've had a late season northern come through. The wind's blowing about 30 miles an hour, so we apologize for that. We don't think it'll be too big an issue, but if you hear something in the background, it's the wind trying to blow the building off the foundation. And we'll get you through this. Since Rex posted our first video, I've gotten a lot of questions and regarding optics and rifles in general. So I want to go through this morning and maybe answer some of your questions regarding what's involved in ordering a custom rifle and choosing an optic for it, and maybe give you some parameters that will help you in designing your custom rifle. What we have here in front of us is a custom 338 Lapua Magnum. This is kind of a high-end rifle. It's heavy. It's expensive to shoot. It's got a very high-end IOR optic on it, and this is for somebody who's very serious about long-range shooting. When we start talking about ordering a custom rifle, we need to basically start with what are you going to use it for? What's its primary function? If you're going to try to use it for multiple applications, then immediately you're already compromising. So again, there are no free lunches like I mentioned in one of my other videos. You need to be realistic about the different things that you're going to use the rifle for. If you want a rifle that's fairly light for hunting, then you may sacrifice a little bit in consistency as you drop down in barrel diameter. Things like that. There are always compromises. So we'll start kind of at the beginning and go through this as far as designing a custom rifle, what you'll need to discuss with your rifle builder, and obviously one of the first places we need to start is budget. A good custom rifle is going to cost you between $3,500 and $5,000. That's just the reality. Some are a little more than that, some are a little less, but all things being equal, that's basically what you're looking at. The factors that determine that, really one of the main things that determines price is going to be the stock or chassis. When you look at the various action manufacturers, this is a Stiller TAC 338. I use a lot of Defiance actions, Surgeon. Most of them run roughly the same price. So the action is not going to change the price of the rifle build a whole lot. If you take a factory Remington action and you do all the blueprinting and truing work to it that needs to be done for the rifle to shoot really accurately, you're still going to be about at the same price as an aftermarket action. So very rarely do I recommend that as a route to go. You're typically much better off going ahead and getting a custom aftermarket action. Barrels, kind of the same story. I like Bartline. I will use Krieger, Rock, Mueller. There are a number of good barrel manufacturers. Hawk Hill is another one. Broughton. Basically, they all cost about the same. You're not going to save any money on a barrel. If you get a good barrel, it's going to cost around $350 for a good barrel blank. So there's not much money to be saved in the action of the barrel. Really, where you start to see some price differences in the stocks and the chassis. You can look at anything from a Manners to Macmillan, AI chassis. Chassis are really popular for a reason. They shoot good and they're easy to get and they're easy to install the barreled action into. So that saves you a lot of time and headache. You don't have to have a fully bedded, pillar bedded application. You can just drop a barreled action into these chassis and a lot of times they'll shoot great. Talking about chassis, one of the things that you want to look at is it going to be a ball milled or a Vblock chassis? There's a lot of difference in them. The Vblock is a very consistent, time-proven application. The ball milling, where they essentially go into the chassis area where the action sits in the chassis, and they theoretically try to ball mill that so that it fits the chassis or fits the action. The problem with that is that all of these actions vary slightly by a few thousandths in diameter, some more than that. So it's very difficult to ball mill a chassis and get it to really fit the action the way that it should. So in most cases, in virtually every case, when you have a ball mill chassis, I recommend that you go ahead and at least skim bed the action because it typically does improve the accuracy. So even if you have you know, a good, this is a ball mill action. There are a number of different manufacturers who do that. Typically you're going to want to skim bed that, so there may be a little additional cost in that through the builder. Whereas a V-block, the only thing I recommend on a V-block type aluminum chassis is that you go ahead and bed the lug. I like to go ahead and have epoxy on both sides of the lug. That way the rifle, anytime you remove and reinstall the barreled action, it always goes back in exactly the same place, and that's very important. Beyond that, you always want a stock or action that has an adjustable cheek cone. You know, to get proper head position, you need to be able to raise this up and down. That's extremely important. We need to be able to adjust the length of pull. This chassis has an adjustable butt pad on it where you can go up and down with a butt pad. That's a nice feature. It's not something you have to have, but it certainly is something that adds to the quality of the setup. I have used a number of different chassis in my rifles. I also use Manners and Macmillan stocks. There's not really a difference in quality. I like Manners personally. I know a lot of guys who shoot them. They're a very nice bunch of people there, very friendly and service oriented, you know, when you call Manners. So I definitely prefer to deal with them as a builder. Tom Manners is a super guy. I've gotten to meet him a number of times, so I know him personally, and so that's probably the difference there, just that I've met some of their folks and they're great people. You know, when we're talking about triggers, again, most of the time on triggers we're going to use Timney or we're going to use Jewel. There is a little bit, about $100 difference in those two parts. The Jewel is an excellent trigger. You will hear some people say they're not reliable. I have run a Jewel for 5 years in the PRS, and 4 or 5 years, and have never had a problem until I finally, after maybe 70,000 cycles on the trigger, I finally had to take it apart and clean it. So I've not found it to be unreliable at all. Another thing that happens that is somewhat surprising to me is people will commit to purchasing a custom rifle and will not leave a budget for the optic. You know, folks, if you're going to spend $3,500 to $5,000 on a rifle, you need to put a good optic on it. It doesn't make any sense to turn around and put a low-end optic on it. So make sure you budget at least $1,200 to $1,500 for an optic if you're going to spend the money to have a custom rifle built. That just, you know, it's just common sense there. Another consideration is, you know, we go back to what are you going to use it for? How much do you need this to weigh? Does it need to be light? If it's going to be a hunting application, you're going to have to go with a smaller barrel. Smaller barrels heat more. They're not quite as accurate after 2 to 3 shots, but you should be able to use something. My recommendation for hunting is not to go below basically a Sendero rim varmint contour. That's heavy enough to maintain accuracy, but it's light enough, especially if you flute the barrel, it's light enough that you can get good consistent repeatability out of the accuracy of the rifle. And you know, when you get down into the smaller and smaller diameter barrels, they're just going to flex more and you're going to lose accuracy. There are no free lunches there. So weight is a primary consideration around the design of the rifle. If weight's not an issue, then you go with a heavy barrel. You're going to get more accuracy out of that, at least theoretically. Are you going to try to use it for competition? You know, if you're going to try to shoot some of these tactical long-range matches like I shoot, then you're going to have to look at that as far as especially the stock or chassis. Some of them are very well set up for that type of work, some of them are not. A lot of the standard hunting type stocks are going to have some limitations when you start trying to run them in competition. You can certainly do that, but it's going to be tough to do in some situations, and they're not going to be intuitive to use in that type of an atmosphere or environment. So, you know, what you're going to use the rifle for ultimately is going to determine, you know, which trigger you pick. I don't like a Jewel trigger in a hunting rifle. It's a very light trigger. I don't think it's excessively safe. I think a Timney that runs about 2.5 pounds is probably a better choice. So that's another consideration is, you know, in a hunting environment, you're going to need to make some different decisions than you are if you're just going to go shoot long range for fun or if you're going to try to compete, you know, in long range competitions. All of these things factor in: weight, length of the barrel. You know, when you look at designing the rifle, you're going to have to determine whether you're going to hand load or not, because the builder is going to cut the throat in the chamber for a certain length overall of the cartridge, And if you're going to run factory ammunition, he needs to know that. If you have the ability to hand load and can move those loads on out a little better, a little more, they typically shoot better. But you're also limited in some calibers by magazine length. A lot of times we'll go to the maximum magazine length and back up about 30 thousandths, and that's how we come up with our actual length that we're going to load our cartridges to. There are a lot of rounds like that. 338 Lapua Magnum being one of them. 6.5 Creedmoor tends to be that way. You want to run them as long as you can run them, where the base boat tail of the bullet is about 50 thousandths in front of the next shoulder joint. So you need to make sure that you can do that given the available magazines. So, you know, whether you're going to run factory or hand-loaded ammunition, you need to have made that decision before you have the rifle built, so that the builder can cut the rifle to whatever you're going to be able to, you know, primarily using. It doesn't mean that the rifle won't shoot other configurations and other loads. It just means it's probably going to shoot that load the best. If it's properly bedded and the chamber's cut really true, it won't be very particular about, you know, the ammo or the amount that the bullet is sitting off of the lands. The lands, the throat is an area where you cut some relief around the bullet so that the bullet starts out of the case before it actually contacts anything. The amount of distance that that bullet travels out of, you know, forward in the case before it touches the lands of the rifle is referred to as jump. One thing I found is that if you get a rifle that will only shoot accurately when the bullet is basically touching the lands, that's typically an indication that the chamber was not cut true. If you cut that chamber true, and I mean dead true to the 10,000th of an inch, the rifle typically won't be nearly as picky about jump, and it won't be nearly as picky about bullets. So if you have a rifle that's very finicky about loading and about how much you jump the bullets or about the bullet seating depth, you typically, in a lot of cases, have a barrel that was not cut correctly or a barreled action that is not mounted correctly in the chassis or stock. Both of those things will cause that. A rifle that's built correctly and is mounted in the chassis or stock correctly should not be particularly picky about load, and it should not be particularly picky about seating depth. So if you have a rifle that's really finicky, you may want to talk to your gunsmith and see if he can do some things to help you with that, because those are typically signs that something is maybe not done as perfect as it could be. I'm not going to say it wasn't done correctly, maybe it's just not done quite as well as it might have been. So these are all considerations when you look at building a custom rifle. You know, you need to look at your budget, you need to include a budget for the optic, you need to look at is weight an issue, is length of barrel an issue. As we shorten the barrel, you're going to lose velocity. As we lose velocity, we lose effectiveness in the round and accuracy downrange. That's a big deal. So you need to determine, again, that's part of weight. You know, if you want to save weight, you may want to go with a shorter barrel. The maximum range that you're going to shoot the rifle at is important to figure out, because again, you know, if you're only going to shoot the rifle at 500 yards, we may be able to shorten the barrel quite a bit and take quite a bit of weight out of it. So all of these things are considerations. You need to be realistic about your budget. You need to be realistic about what your shooting skill is, and you know what the overall cost of this is going to be. Also, if you're going to spend the time and money to get a good rifle and a good optic, and you've never had any real formal training in long-range shooting, go somewhere and get some good formal training. There are a lot of good schools around the country where you can get good long-range training. So these are just some things to think about before you order a custom rifle. And you know, another thing is that the machine work that goes into building a really accurate rifle is not tremendously complicated in the overall scheme of machine work. You just have to be careful and take your time, and most of the guys who do good work have good reputations. The reality is it only takes about a week to build the rifle at most. You know, when you see lead times, when your builder tells you he's got a lead time of 5, 6, 8, 10 months, it may be because he's busy, but it may also be because he's having to wait on a chassis or a barrel or a stock. So ask him, you know, is that lead time based on just how busy you are, or maybe if I went with another set of components, could I get a little faster if I needed to? I will tell you from my experience that, you know, the stock companies, Manners, Macmillan, their lead times are what they are, and it doesn't matter who you are, and it doesn't matter what you're willing to pay. You're going to wait however long you're going to wait to get those parts. Same thing with the action manufacturers and the barrel manufacturers. So a lot of times when, you know, you're looking at a 6-month build time on your rifle. Most of that is just for your builder to get the parts in. It's just difficult to get them any faster than that. So once he gets it, a week, he should have your rifle built. So, if you're wondering why it takes so long to get some of these custom rifles, a lot of times it's just the availability of the components that go into building the rifle. So try to be patient with your builder. If he's answering your phone call to ask how long it's going to take to build your rifle, he's not building your rifle. So be patient with him. He will get it knocked out as fast as he can once he gets the components in. If you have any questions at all regarding rifle builds, please contact me, pmacprecision@gmail.com. I'm happy to answer your questions as best I can. If I don't know the answer, I probably know somebody who does. Thank you for watching.